Welcome, 8th graders, to today's Explainer. So, have you ever stopped to wonder why major cities are located exactly where they are? I mean, it wasn't just some random accident. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating historical secret: how the natural world around us quietly but powerfully coded the entire blueprint for early America. We're going to look at early colonial foundations and see how geography wasn't just, a passive background. It was actually the main character in the story of human settlement. Here's our roadmap for today's tour. First, we've got the geographic blueprint, then coasts and deep harbors, rivers as colonial highways, climate and colonial crops, building your historical claim, and finally, education with biblical morality. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Section 1, the geographic blueprint. The big idea here is figuring out exactly how early colonists knew where to survive and thrive in a totally unfamiliar new world. So when we say geography in this context, we're talking about how rivers, coasts, climate, and natural resources literally dictated where people built their homes and how they made a living. When you can connect a specific place to its purpose, you can actually predict patterns in history. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. You start to see that a town wasn't just built anywhere. It was built somewhere for a very specific reason. Arriving in a totally uncharted wilderness, you don't just build a town on a whim. You build it where the river gives you fresh water, or the forest offers shelter, or the soil actually guarantees a harvest. The land dictates your literal survival. And honestly, understanding that is the absolute key to decoding history. Now, seeing how these early settlers use their surroundings brings us to a foundational truth in Psalm 90, verse 12. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. We study how people use their time, their land, and their resources back then because it helps us gain a heart of wisdom for our own lives right now. Learning history is really, at its core, about learning how to make wise choices with what we've been given. Moving on to Section 2, coasts and deep harbors. Let's step to the edge of the map and put on our historical detective hats. Let's test those instincts for a second. Imagine you're looking at an old parchment map, and you spot a settlement sitting right on a deep harbor, right where a massive river meets the ocean. What do you think happens next? Like, what kind of industries are naturally going to explode in that specific spot? You guessed it, massive deep harbors meant large ships could safely dock without running aground. That one single geographic feature instantly turned those coastal spots into booming port cities. Picture what that actually looked and sounded like back in the 1600s. You'd have massive shipbuilding operations with huge wooden beams crashing and saws buzzing, commercial fishing fleets heading out at dawn, and docks completely bustling with merchants unloading heavy crates. And why did all this happen right there? Because those deep harbors invited large ocean-going vessels, basically connecting these early colonists to the rest of the global markets. The environment provided the opportunity, and human industry answered the call. Without that deep water, those massive ships just couldn't get close enough to land, and those booming trade hubs would literally never have existed. Traveling inward from the coast, we hit the fast-moving water. That brings us to Section 3, rivers, the literal colonial highways. Keeping those detective hats on, let's move inland. If you're looking at a map dotted with fast-moving rivers, and suddenly large wooden water wheels start popping up in every settlement, what does that tell you about the people living there? What are they making, and how are they doing it? Exactly. The local economy likely revolves around heavy timber and grain processing. Let's think about how this actually worked in real life. Before electricity, you needed an immense amount of energy to cut down massive trees, or grind thousands of pounds of tough wheat into fine flour. That fast-moving river provided pure natural mechanical power. The rushing water literally slammed into those giant wooden water wheels, spinning them continuously. That spinning motion transferred inside to run giant metal saws or heavy grinding stones, which saved thousands of hours of grueling, back-breaking human labor. But the genius of settling by the river doesn't stop there. Once you melt that lumber or ground that flour, you had heavy goods to sell. Those same rivers acted as a giant flowing conveyor belt, the ultimate colonial highway. Settlers could load their processed goods onto boats and just float them from the deep interior straight back to those coastal ports we were just talking about. Now let's step off the rivers and look down at the dirt for Section 4, climate and colonial crops, because, as you'll see, the weather and the soil fundamentally shaped day-to-day life. Let's head south for a minute. If a region has incredibly rich soil, warm weather, and a growing season that feels like it lasts all year long, how does that completely alter the economy? What happens to the farms, and what does that mean for labor? Well, expect plantation agriculture and a strong export economy. The geography allowed cash crops like tobacco and rice to be grown almost year-round, so these farms scaled up massively to meet huge global demand from Europe. But, and this is a critical but, this level of massive agricultural production required intense, continuous manual labor. Tragically, this environment and the economic drive fueled a social structure built entirely around the horrific reliance on enslaved labor in the southern colonies. The geography made these highly profitable cash crops possible, which in turn drove the economic decisions and the deeply flawed, tragic social systems of that entire region. The land offered an opportunity for vast wealth, but it was human choices that built an entire system of exploitation to harvest it. And this breakdown perfectly illustrates how all the different colonies adapted to their totally unique environments. Think of the early colonies in three distinct zones. Up north in New England, you've got rocky terrain and much colder weather. You couldn't grow massive fields of delicate crops there. So they adapted. They relied on smaller family farms, and they turned their attention to the massive forests and the ocean, creating an economy driven by timber, shipbuilding, and fishing. Now contrast that with the southern colonies. Down there, you have those warm, long-growing seasons and incredibly fertile soil. As we just discussed, that geography practically begged for large-scale plantation agriculture and export crops. The environment was the exact opposite of New England, so the economy was the exact opposite too. And then, right in the middle, you have the middle colonies, the absolute best of both worlds. They had remarkably fertile farmland. They were actually called the breadbasket colonies because of all the grain farming, but they also had incredibly busy deepwater trading ports. They beautifully balanced both inland farming and coastal trading. In every single region, geography truly directed their historical paths. All right, moving into Section 5, building your historical claim. It's time to take all these incredible insights and put your knowledge to work. So, here are your homework tasks. It's time for you to become the historian. Your mission is to use your new map reading skills to explain how natural resources guided human choices. You're going to pick a colonial city and list its environmental features, trace how rivers acted as highways, compare New England and southern farming, and describe how forests shaped a colony's economy. This is where you prove you can connect the place to the purpose. And to build a rock-solid historical claim, you really just need to follow these 3 steps. Step 1, pick a specific colonial location. Step 2, identify its key environmental features. And Step 3, write a claim linking the geography to the settlement pattern, making sure to back it up with 2 pieces of evidence. Because in history, evidence is the absolute backbone of the truth. It's all about making that logical, undeniable connection between the land and the people. Finally, Section 6, Education with Biblical Morality. As we wrap up, we really have to look beyond just the historical facts on a map. Geography undeniably brought the early colonists unbelievable power, resources, and wealth. But we must remember the words of Micah 6, verse 8. To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Biblical wisdom calls us to look at the massive power and wealth generated by our environment, and instead of letting it make us greedy, to choose to use those resources with fairness, with deep humility, and with genuine care for others. And you know, this is exactly why the heroesmartacademy Godly Learners series intertwines biblical morality with education. Because truth be told, education without morality will ultimately hurt people. Think back to the history we just uncovered. What is the point of knowing how to use a deep harbor or a fast-moving river to build massive wealth if you just use that wealth to oppress others or build systems of exploitation? Education gives you the how to build, how to grow, how to profit. But biblical morality gives you the why and the ought, ensuring you don't use your intelligence to hurt those around you. We absolutely need both. Which brings us to a powerful promise found in Romans 8, verse 6. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. True peace of mind belongs to those who keep their minds spiritual. It's our experience that when you engage your learning with a solid moral compass, your knowledge actually brings life and peace to your community, rather than destruction and division. So the crucial takeaway is this. We've mapped out exactly how rivers, coasts, and climates shape the past, and how early colonists used their resources to build an entire world. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to carry with you today. Now that you have this wonderful education, this knowledge, and the resources around you, how will you choose to use your education to act justly today? You hold the keys to the future. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.